used to prosecute HSBC last year when the bank was caught laundering billions in drug money for Mexican cartels.
If you do prosecute, if you do bring a criminal charge, it will have a negative impact on the national economy, perhaps even the world economy. And I think that is a function of the fact that some of these institutions have become too large.
And in 2011, banking giant Wachovia received no criminal charges after they were found to have laundered more than $378 billion in drug money for the Sinaloa cartel as well. But incredibly, as cartel money laundering banks are protected by the federal government, the DEA has threatened those same banks with legal action if they store cash for small-time legal marijuana businesses in Washington and Colorado. As INFOWARS has said for years, the DEA at the highest level is nothing more than a smuggling and protection agency for cartels that work with major banks. Unfortunately, the federal government's relationship with dangerous cartels goes much further. High-ranking Sinaloa member Jesus Zambada Niebla recently admitted that the cartel had received weapons from the U.S. government for years under Operation Fast and Furious, while the Obama administration claims the operation was just to track guns into Mexico. Niebla revealed the weapons were to be used for war with rival cartels. Ironically, Wednesday's Senate hearing was focused primarily on drug cultivation in Afghanistan, where the arrival of U.S. troops in 2001 has led to record-level opium production. The New York Times revealed one of Afghanistan's biggest drug kingpins was on the CIA payroll.
The Taliban finances much of its operations by selling opium, which is grown from poppies, which are right now being harvested. So here's the question: why are American troops now helping Afghan farmers grow that opium?
But back to this decision to legalize marijuana for recreational use at the state level.
This is a bad experiment. It's a bad experiment. And it's going to cost the United States in terms of social costs.
What about the social costs of incarcerating millions of Americans for the victimless crime of purchasing drugs? Drugs the agency itself has shipped in the country. Studies show the decriminalization of marijuana for recreational use could lessen the demand for illegal drugs being smuggled across the border. So what is the Drug Enforcement Agency so afraid of? Well, as states are reclaiming the powers reserved for them, as granted by the 10th Amendment, federal agencies are scrambling to maintain their stranglehold on the massive profits they receive from the illegal drug trade and the prison industrial complex.
So there's this huge debate right now. Some states have legalized marijuana, other states are totally against it. We've got a kid that's facing life in prison for making pot brownies. Meanwhile, the DEA is helping to funnel in billions of dollars worth of drugs for Mexican drug cartels in exchange for information.
Yeah, they're running it, and meanwhile they're telling everybody that they're actually, it's really actually a war of drugs on the American public. CIA, as we've all pointed out here, Alex for a long time has pointed out how it's being run by the government. But they've got these little bureaucratic fiefdoms, you know, and it's not just the DEA and the police departments who get to seize people's property, but it's also even goes all the way to the prisons. They have a real piece of this, the public prisons as well as the government prisons. They've got a bureaucracy as well, but there's a lot of profit in the private prisons.
Well, they're using soldiers, too, overseas to guard these opium fields, and then they're smuggling that stuff back to America. I mean, this whole...
But if you get caught with it, you're going to jail.
It's been going on for a long time, just like Tosh Plumlee pointed out. I mean, he broke all that with the Iran-Contra affair. We had... you know, it was broken about the crack cocaine trade that was happening there, and so, you know, and the reporter who did that got killed. So, I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Nothing is changing, and they don't want it to change. That's the whole point, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Basically, everyone is trying to figure out how they can get their cut of the legalization of marijuana. We have Monsanto and DuPont and Pfizer and other companies have already put patents on their process for pulling out creating synthetic cannabinoids. And we're hearing a lot in the news, thousands of people have died from taking synthetic marijuana. It's called spice. And so they're really cracking down on all these businesses that are selling this legal version of synthetic marijuana. Turns out Pfizer is the company that was behind the ingredient in there that was basically killing these people. So they created the synthetic cannabinoid. So I mean,
for a long time
they're
they've
messing with nature.
They fought back against the legalization of medical marijuana, which is very effective for pain treatment, for nausea for people, and they would offer them a synthetic derivative of it called Marinol, which was totally ineffective. And I remember an activist in California who literally was put in prison by the judge and literally choked to death on his own vomit in prison because he couldn't stop the nausea. I mean, that's what's really happening. That's the reality of what's going on with this.
Well, those drugs are appealing too to soldiers as well, because they think, hey, I can't, pop hot on a urine test, and a lot of them are taken. And I've seen drastic changes in people's, mental, stability. I've seen guys smoke it a few times and completely just end up wandering through the desert. When I was in El Paso, Texas, I got a call from one of my sergeant majors saying, hey, you've got a soldier wandering in the desert. Cops just picked him up. He was smoking spice.
Well, that's always happened. That happened with alcohol prohibition. It will always happen with prohibition. It will happen with gun prohibition. If they prohibit guns, we're going to have new and virulent strains, types of guns, just as we did with alcohol. They increased the intensity of the alcohol during Prohibition. They created new, more concentrated forms, and we've seen that in every category of drugs as this war on drugs has gone on and on and on, as well as the crime, as well as the corruption within government.
Right, and it's we the people that are going to get the hammer down on us. It's not going to be the drug companies that are responsible for this synthetic cannabinoids killing people, and it's not going to be the DEA who's caught helping the drug cartels bring in the drugs, and it's not the banks who are helping to funnel all of this dirty drug money. It's the person who makes pot brownies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jakari, we got time for one more. Tell us about your report.
Well, we're talking about the drugs, and I think this also ties into it, the drugging of troops. The Fort Hood shooting, the most recent one. Myself and Kit Daniels, we went down there to investigate it. And Kit asked the lieutenant general who was speaking at the press conference just flat out, he said, General, was this shooter on any type of drugs? He said, yeah. So when you're like, whoa, we were just so shocked that he just came out and said it. I gave him respect for that. We really didn't have an immediate follow-up. We had to sit there and think about it for a second. So, I mean, I had to respect them for saying that. And, the Fort Hood shooting, a lot of these things get very negative publicity, and of course, they would. And a lot of the blame falls on the first responders. Why did it take so long for the police to get there? And, I don't so much blame the police, because you have a duty to protect yourself, whether it's, a shooting at Fort Hood or, the South by Southwest driver who drove on the sidewalk. And I told Acevedo that. I was like, man, it wasn't your fault. That guy was, crazy and drove on the sidewalk. But the deal about it is that you have to be able to protect yourself. And, and even when we went to Fort Hood, not just talking about the drugs, we also said, would you change the policy, or other people asked, would you change the policy about people having firearms on base? Lieutenant General says, I don't see any problem with the policy. I'm like, you got how many people shot, how many people dead? You don't see a problem with the policy? Yeah,
well, he said the response time was pretty good, but
it was
not
average.
Good enough.
They
right?
said it was average. I guess that's 12 minutes or so.
The most unsafe place a soldier can be is on base, because your weapons are locked up in an armory.
Right.
You've got to call your commander. The commander's got to get an armor. The armor's got to show up whenever he decides to get there, and then they have to find the list. They've got to match your card with that weapon. It's a huge process. I mean, it is so unsafe to be a soldier on a base when you've only got a few guys out there watching your back.
Especially at a base where we've already seen incident take place. Nothing was really done to satisfy this need for people to be armed. And there's always this notion that if you allow people to carry fire. I talked about this with a guy a couple weeks ago. I was filming something out at UT with Joe, our camera guy, and he was like, well, the guy was saying to me, if you let people carry guns, and everybody's going to carry guns, just like you can carry a gun in Texas, concealed carry, and not everybody walks around with a gun. In my home state of Oklahoma, you can open carry a gun. I go to Oklahoma, I've seen probably like 1 or 2 guys when I go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving walking around with their firearms. It may be more prevalent in the rural areas, but this notion that everybody's going to carry a gun is not true or factual at all.
Well, it's an issue of trust. I mean, I remember when Biden and others went to Afghanistan and other foreign theaters where they were armed because they were not in a base, and they confiscated their arms, remember? Or the inaugural parade where they took the bullets out of their guns. And they don't trust citizens, and they don't trust soldiers with weapons.
Well, they don't trust the soldiers that they're drugging up with weapons.
Yeah.
When Donald Rumsfeld came to Camp Anaconda in 2006 in Iraq, I was asked if I would go, and I said no immediately right off the bat. But they also asked the other soldiers, said, hey, who minds leaving their weapon here and then coming out to watch them talk? And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm in Iraq, I'm in combat. No. I mean, anyone who thinks they're just going to lay their M4 down to go watch this guy talk, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, so I mean, whether it's drugs or firearms, whatever, we had a lot going on at Fort Hood, and here's the report.
indication do you have of premeditation here? Was there anything tied to the timing of it? Was there something going on at this building?
I do not know. That'll be part of the investigation. I did not say his rank nor his name, and I'll do that when his family is appropriately notified.
Sir, you said he came from another installation in February. Can you tell us which one that is?
At this time, I prefer not. He was undergoing behavioral health and psychiatric treatment for depression and anxiety. There are reports, I don't know if he was diagnosed in the clinical sense. There are reports that he self-reported a traumatic brain injury previously coming back from the Iraq.
Was he on any sort of medications?
He was on medications, that's correct.
Like SSRIs or antidepressants, anything of that nature?
Yes.
Was the FBI already on the scene due to the alert that they gave out about on Monday regarding a possible mass shooting?
We have a local FBI liaison officer,
okay.
But no, large FBI assets were not here.
Okay.
They are actually inbound to help with the investigation. All of the wounded and killed were military.
General, the female officer who engaged him, how would you describe what she did today?
So it's clearly heroic, what she did at that moment in time, and she did her job, and she did exactly what we would expect of the United States Army military police.
What are your thoughts on soldiers carrying concealed weapons?
You're not allowed to carry concealed weapons.
Do you think that should change?
No, I don't think soldiers should have concealed weapons on board. We have law enforcement agents. We're trained professionals, and I don't endorse carrying.
How long did it take for the law enforcement to reach the scene?
It was within minutes.
Within minutes?
Exact time, probably 10 to 15, maybe.
So you're saying that we should have concealed weapons, but it still takes 10 to 15 minutes for law enforcement to even reach the scene? What's your comments on that?
I think the law enforcement acted very rapidly and swiftly, given the nature of this circumstance.
I understand that, but there's still people that have died.
I'm not going to get in a debate with you on carrying weapons on a military installation. I just ask for all your thoughts and prayers for the fallen and for the wounded in this particular case. Thank you very much.
General, I know all the years.
Excuse me, General. General, what do you think about the FBI saying that there was a terror alert on Monday about a potential Fort Hood shooting, potential Fort Hood situation?
There's no link that we know of to that particular case that we know of. We're investigating everything, but there's no particular link. I am aware of that FBI report, and there's no particular link to that we know of.
Well, that's it for this pre-recorded special edition of Memorial Day for the Nightly News. And thank you, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, Leanne McAdoo, Jakari Jackson, our INFOWARS staff. Now, join us this week. We're going to be live at Bilderberg, and we'll be back tomorrow night at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. Celebrate the spirit of 1776 with the George Washington brass belt buckle or this incredibly sharp-looking 1776 hat. Badass. And be sure to check out the new arrivals at InfoWars Life, where you can prepare your body to perform at peak levels with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine, Super Male Vitality, and Fluoride Shield. And wake up, America. Immune Support Blend is the healthy choice for the gourmet coffee lover. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
You are watching the InfoWars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. Members can share their passcodes with up to 11 other people, and your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.